think that we have to keep doing what we're doing, which is things like critical mass and occasional demonstrations and showing up and making noise and making people uncomfortable who are making the wrong decisions. I mean, that's how politics works in this culture. And we need to be able to be more articulate about a larger vision of the transformation that we want. Because I think if insofar as we're pushing for something bigger and better than just bicycling, that vision's compelling. And a lot of people will get excited about it, and more people are likely to give some sort of support, politically and otherwise, to a larger transformative vision than they are to merely bicycling. So I think associating the bicycle and bicycling politics with a larger transitional agenda, and there's now this meme out there for transition towns and resilient communities, and there's a tremendous number of organizations in the Bay Area who are committed to this Bay Localize and Urban Habitat and Transform and a number of these other groups who are actually doing work that is transition work, transitioning from this culture to a society with far less energy resources to use and far less wastage of what we do have, so that there can actually be a good life, equivalently materially wealthy life, defined differently. Obviously, you can't just be burning so much energy and just having it go into the atmosphere. You can't be throwing so much water down the toilet, literally. What a stupid idea, drinking water for toilets, etc. So there's a lot of thinking that's come up now through permaculture and other kinds of radical ecological activism that's beginning to define the parameters of another way of life. That doesn't mean throwing out everything that we know of modern life. I mean, not at all. We want electricity, we want to have gas, we want to have a comfortable life in which we can have the things we want and eat well and have a good convivial social life and whatever we need materially, shelter and transportation and books and magazines and the internet and everything else. I mean, I don't think anybody's talking about getting rid of any of that stuff. But how do we provide all those kinds of things, not just for those of us that have it, but for everybody, because a great number of people don't have it already on the planet and even in the Bay Area. So there's a question of justice, a question of redistribution, a question of those who have being taught that they're not entitled, even though they think they earned it in some strange way. They didn't earn it, they stole it. Most property is theft. I mean, Kropotkin had it right. And you should have a right to your stuff. I'm not saying you should lose your shirt off your back or your home where you live or anything like that. But that the general distribution of resources and the allocation of wealth is so skewed and so out of whack and has gotten so much worse over the last 2-3 generations that it's time to reverse that process. And I think that reversal, the bicycle is just a piece of that story. It's not by any means the central piece even, but it's a contributing factor that we have found each other through. And insofar as it serves that service culturally, it's a good thing, and we need to be able to push it further. I think that's the dilemma that we all face. Like, how do we make radical change in a world in which all we're offered is extremely piecemeal, minor reforms that might make things a little bit better if we're incredibly diligent and show up at all the hearings and come with our handmade signs and beg, borrow, and steal our way to their attention, and then maybe, just maybe, they might deign to change some minor part of their policy or their investment strategies as the people running the budgets. In general, that doesn't work. I mean, as we know, we go to these things for years. Bicyclists have been agitating for years, with some success. I mean, I remember when BART, wouldn't let you take your bike on BART without having a permit. And they would hassle you like crazy. They would just hassle you to death every time you showed up with your bike. Even with a permit, it was like, okay, very few hours you could ride. You cannot ever take it on an escalator or anything like that. They still officially claim that, but everybody does it anyway now. So, and then Caltrain, of course, has made major accommodations, thanks to the incredibly diligent activism of certain bike advocates and activists. So there's evidence for it working in certain realms, and that level of sort of narrow focus, where you just want to get more space for bikes on the train, or in this case, get a bike lane on the Bay Bridge. It does occasionally generate results, that level of narrow focus. But if your goal is this larger transformation, this larger cultural transformation that we were starting to talk about, well, then it's just a matter of having enough, what I call radical patience, to see it through, which means it may not happen in any time soon. You can push for it. The more articulate we get about it, the more able we are to describe the full range of transformations that we think are part and parcel of what needs to happen, the more chance there are for other people to get behind it and gain steam with it. but the existing structure of democracy is broken, and the functional series of hearings that we're supposed to have our voices heard at are designed precisely so that we aren't heard. That's what they do, is they come and make your 2-minute statement and go away, and we'll make the decision we're going to make regardless, because you're not the you're just getting your little moment of theater here, and the real powers are the ones we talk to when we're not here. And that's who we talk to all day long, every day. That's who appoints us to these seats. These guys are all appointed, right? And so they're not elected officials, mostly. I mean, some of them are elected to their various other positions that they might have. But they get elected because they find who can give them the money to get elected. Very few of them. I mean, Chris Daley may be, kind of an example of somebody who really is a populist politician that came out of the grassroots, and he's on that board. But that's rare. Most of them are actually more in tune with the needs and interests of suburban America, or maybe urban America, in the sense of, we need to keep our big corporations here. We need to give them the tax breaks. We need to make sure that wage labor and business as we know it continues, because that's the source of revenue for the state, which then allows us to make investments in this. This is a completely broken system. And you can't go up in a 2-minute hearing and go, I think the entire system is broken and I think you should overthrow wage labor as the organizing principle of modern life. And then we can talk about what work needs to be done and how we could restructure our society. By the time you're at this 2-minute hearing, all the questions are answered. And all you can do is throw your thing in there to say, oh, I did my part, I participated in the process. And for some people, it's very satisfying to participate in that process. For some of us, it's an incredibly empty experience, and we won't even do it. It's hard to even get me to go to any of these hearings, because I consider it a complete waste of time. Now, on the other hand, as I said, there is some evidence that occasionally it works. So some people, I forget the guy who was on the game on Caltrain, Cal somebody or other, spent years and years of his life fighting to get bikes on Caltrain, and it worked. Now you have a lot of bike commuters going up and down the peninsula on Caltrain, so great. There's also a political assumption that has to do with the culture that has evolved over the last 30 years or so, where, after the demise of the New Left, which didn't really disappear, it just kind of percolated down into daily life projects of various types, civil rights and ecological projects and so on and so forth. So there's a common sensibility out there that the culture war is attacking, right? Trying to go back to the normal American life and don't do this new stuff. But the people that run the Bike Coalition, or the people like Obama, or people who run the Democratic Party, and the coalition, I would say, is very close to the same logic, generally try to interpret what they think is possible based on the right-wing zeitgeist of the moment. Like, what is the larger logic of this culture? Well, it's really against change. It doesn't want anything to cost anything. It all has to be privately paid for. All these different assumptions. And so let's accept in a real politic way all these assumptions. And now, instead of asking for what we want, we're going to ask for this thing that's really many, many steps back here that we think we might get. Well, that's just dumb. From a negotiating point of view, that's just dumb. Like, if you think you want this, well, then ask for this, and maybe you'll get that. But you're not going to get this if that's what you ask for. You're going to get this. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of astonishing to watch people over and over again make the same mistakes. I mean, here's Obama's just done it on everything, because the guy's actually super conservative. He was never any way a leftist or somebody to be enthused about. I was against him from the get-go.